Time now to go in depth on this Wednesday, and today we're looking at a new study on autism. An estimated 1 in 88 children in the U.S. has been diagnosed with autism. The newest study suggests that autism runs in the families of prodigies. The journal Intelligence studied 8 super talented children, and 4 out of the 8 of the brilliant children reported relatives with an autism-type diagnosis. The research also shows that prodigies reach stunning levels of achievement in nonverbal, rule-bound areas at a very young age. They're different from savants who also demonstrate extraordinary gifts but have social or mental impairments. Now let's turn to the medical experts as we dig deeper into this new study. And joining me right now to talk about more autism and this study that we've been looking at right now is Kelly Prince, Behavioral Consulting of Tampa Bay. Kelly, always good to have you on.
Thank you.
Dr. Randy Shuck with Priority Health. All right, the nature of this study is they were looking at prodigies, and I don't know whether it's a conclusion or where they're pushing it, is that autism runs in families of prodigies. Now, your reaction to this?
You know, unfortunately, there haven't been a lot of studies on this previously, but, you know, from my experience with some of the families that we worked with, there are other diagnoses and disorders that are, you know, in the families of children with autism, including giftedness and things of this sort.
Yeah, and why do you think this is getting attention right now? Or is it because that autism is still such a mystery, and we'll talk about the spectrums, et cetera, is that anytime there's anything new, everybody kind of goes, oh, what's that mean?
Well, this is such a diverse disease pattern, and I really don't want to call it a disease pattern because it's really kind of a syndrome of issues.
Okay.
And we're talking about abilities of kids, so it's a very hot topic for most people. But realistically, you got to think about it. You have this horrible thing over here that some people view as just such a bad handicap, and they have these glimmers of light through it. And so we kind of look at that as where's the positives out of this disease process that we're seeing, and I think we're seeing this in some of these studies.
Okay, so is it genetic? Is being a prodigy genetic? Is autism genetic? Or do we know the answers to either of those?
I mean, I think there's still more research that's warranted in those areas.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that shows that those individuals that are out there that we call genius have some quirks, and those quirks are kind of interesting to look at. You know, in society we have problems with people who don't really work well with other people, but they have a really good trait that we like to use, and they become very successful in that. And if you look at the definition of autism, it kind of fits within that pattern. So I think what the researchers are trying to do there is really just kind of say, why are these people different, and how can we do something about that?
No, they're not trying to do the backwards correlation and saying, oh, there's a prodigy, therefore you must have autism.
I don't know. Well,
I mean, is that a possibility, or is that really stretching it?
I mean, I think that might be stretching it, but I mean, I think what they're trying to do is just, you know, try to find some links so that we can use this information to help, you know, as far as determining what the causes are in the future. And
what's the difference between, now another term, being a savant was somebody that we think that, oh, they just all of a sudden walked up to the piano and they played Brahms, whatever, you know, and a prodigy and a person with autism?
I'd like to defer that one to her because she's much better at that.
I think a small percentage of people with autism do have that savant portion of it, but I think you know, they also have other deficits in certain areas. So I mean, so they might have this great skill, but when it comes to communicating with others or social skills, I mean, I think they lack in those other areas.
It was defined as this in this study: an island of genius lapsed by waves of disability. Is that pretty good definition?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, like I said, I mean, you could look at a child that has autism, and they might have great skills in certain areas, and when you look at the child, that they maybe appear to be in their own world, and they're not able to communicate with you, but then you see, you know, what they're good, really amazing, that they have skills that are above others in that area.
So these lines that either somebody drew or they're just out there because we don't know how to confine these things, between autism and a person being a prodigy, I guess the study says they're a lot closer than maybe we think.
I think there's a very fine line. As I say, there's a fine line between genius and insanity. So we're looking at these specific things as well, saying, well, if this person has this disability, how can we use this disability to help them in the future? So I think it really targets more for researchers and family members when they have this diagnosis, not to be crestfallen, not to have such a terrible weight on them, that there might be some very wonderful things underneath there if we could just explore it and see if there is some traits or some genetic issues that we can help them with.
So let's go back to the word prodigy. They have scored off the charts when it comes to attention to details. Do we know why?
I mean, unfortunately, we don't know why, but I do think, you know, knowing this information, especially with the people that I work with, you know, we can use that to our advantage. So if they have attention to detail, we can use that when it comes to teaching skills. If they have a great working memory, we're going to use that to our advantage so that we can work on some of those areas that they are deficient in.
Also off the charts, what they're called working memory. What does that mean?
That means the stuff that we use every day. So, like, for me in medicine, I have 37 books that I have to use. Well, in that, I have to be able to recall that at a certain time in my life in order to use it. So that's my working memory. I can't remember everything, but I can remember most of the stuff that's useful for me. So when I work, whatever I do for work, I use that memory, and I have a very large memory to allow me to do that at any time.
And those prodigies are the ones that can do that, that can absorb things. That's like the 7-year-old who's now a junior in college. I mean, how do they do that?
I mean, it's amazing. I mean, some of the clients we work with, I mean, you know, whatever they're interested in, I mean, it could be something as basic as your license plate number, and you provide that information to them one time, and every time they see you for years, they repeat it back to you. So it's amazing.
Just so I don't confuse our audience, then is autism hereditary? Do we know? Yes, no, or not?
I mean, from the research that I've read, I mean, there's a genetic component, which we feel strongly about, as well as some environmental component.
Okay, prodigies, same thing?
Well, if you're going to talk about a spectrum again, it's possible, but I don't know if there's a whole family of prodigies out there that we have it. So I guess probably the genetic variance is it's possible, but not an absolute possibility.
Okay, let's try to boil this all down to, is this information going to help us to treat kids with autism in the future, or is this just going to muddy up the water and confuse us even more?
Well, I think that as a disease spectrum, it's going to give some positive light to it, and therefore we're going to see more research for it, and we're probably going to find better uses for their talents.
Kelly, same for you.
Absolutely. I mean, I just feel like it does give parents some hope that you know, when they take their child in to get assessed, not everything is negative. They certainly have some strengths, and we need to use those to teach them those other skills.
And just so I don't want to muddy it up the waters, but Asperger's, is this kind of in this mix too, because they're very close to each other?
I mean, a lot of children with Asperger's do have age-appropriate communication skills, and sometimes that of older people. So I think they're probably a little bit closer on the spectrum, I guess you could say, with a person that has the prodigy syndrome.
Yeah, and last word to you, doctor, because we have parents that have kids that are autistic, and they are struggling.
Absolutely.
Because it's not easy.
Now, the problem with autistic, again, there's high functioning, medium functioning, and low functioning, and the ones that struggle are the ones that have the harder kids to take care of because they're so separate from society. So it is a challenge, and when we're talking about these studies, we're not talking about the low functioning autistic child. We're really talking about a high functioning, maybe Asperger, or even something that may come out later as something that's part of autism, but really not recognized yet. So it's a tough disease. I'm not going to say it's not. The challenge that we have with social issues and getting them in the community is very challenging for all parents. It is a full-time job. People like her do a wonderful thing to help us get them into society, but it's still a full-time job.
All right, we're going to keep our eyes on this research, again, because you get a lot of new stuff, and we're trying to filter out exactly what it means. Kelly, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me.